So I'm cleaning up some hostas today, and I thought this would be a good time to just talk to you a little bit about what I do for fall cleanup. It's a huge question with people. First of all, I'm going to start by saying there are ways that I like to do my fall cleanup and ways that I think have natural benefits for your garden. But whatever you do for fall cleanup, it really can't be wrong. With the possible exception of pruning shrubs that you shouldn't be pruning, and therefore affecting their ability to flower, I can't think of much that's really going to be a disaster one way or the other in your garden. So my way is the way I do it. It doesn't have to be the way you do it, but I thought it might be helpful for you to know why I do what I do. So right now I'm cleaning up hostas. This is one of the few perennials that I actually remove from my garden for fall. I do that because I do have a lot of slugs here, and slugs can harbor in there quite a bit. So if I can get those cleaned up now, I think that's better for me. Most of the rest of the perennials I leave standing. So there's a lot of reasons to leave perennials standing. So one, it can be better for the plants. There is some evidence to show that that's the case. I believe that the reason behind that is because foliage helps trap snow, so therefore it provides more of a snow cover on a plant. Snow is good for plants. It provides a great insulation layer. Also, the number one reason, in my opinion, is that it's good for the ecosystem of your garden. Leaving plants stand provides a place for insects to overwinter in your garden. Beneficial insects, insects that we want. Solitary bees will nest in stems of grasses and hollow stems of certain perennials. There are predator insects that will overwinter in your garden, and these will wake up early and be there. So as soon as the bad guys come in, they're ready to go. It's just, I think, it's the choice that I make for my garden. Now, that's not how I started gardening. When I started gardening, the idea was you just wiped your garden out, basically. You had a blank slate. Fortunately, that's not the case anymore because I think my garden is much more interesting looking in winter. I prefer to have things standing in my garden to catch the snow and have something there. Now, it is more work in spring. There's no doubt about it. You're going to have to clean those things out in spring. So there's trade-off there. So, some years if I knew I had something coming up in spring, I might clean out half of my garden. For the most part, I have enough jobs to get done in fall that I am constantly racing against the clock. So I prioritize the things that I really want to do. So in that case, that's get rid of these hostas. The nice thing is we've had several freezes here. So these hostas have all flopped over. They're very malleable, as you can see, but they're not slimy yet. Hostas get very slimy. If you let them sit for winter, they get very slimy in spring, and they're not exactly pleasant to pull off. But you can just pull the foliage off. In the cases where I need to cut something like a flower stem, which can be, I've been using this. This is actually a little harvesting tool. It's like a little mini sickle, and it's really great to just get in there and wipe them out without having, it's just very quick. So I like that quite a bit. But for the most part, everything comes out by hand. So that's what I'm doing here. Other jobs that you can do in the garden and should do in the garden are weeding. Just keep weeding. Now I will say, I'm not going to lie, weeding is the last thing on my priority list. I'm going to have to weed in spring no matter what. It would be better if I weeded now. But there are other things that really have to be done for sure. So I will do those things first before I come back and do weeding. And we'll see how much energy I have at that point. Another thing is edging your beds. If you edge your beds now, you may not even have to do it in spring. It cleans up the garden. Everything looks good from the get-go. That is another thing that I put way down on the priority list because it's nice to do, but you don't have to do it. So another thing you can do is protect plants that are going to need some kind of protection. My oak leaf hydrangeas are under constant attack by deer. So if I don't cage them in winter, put a physical barrier around them, they will get eaten. So I put cages around my oak leaf hydrangeas. There might be other plants in your garden that have a similar issue that you want to just protect them. Newly planted things should, if you've planted trees or shrubs this year, make sure they go into winter. I say this all the time, keep watering. Make sure they go into winter well watered. So right up until the ground's frozen, you want to keep watering the newly planted trees and shrubs that you've put in your garden this year. That will help them weather whatever winter's going to throw at them. Also, make sure you put a layer of mulch on there. I actually go around to all of my sort of, really prized trees and shrubs and things and put down a layer of leaf mulch, which is obviously plentiful at this time of year. We just suck it up with the lawnmower, drive over it a couple of times with the lawnmower, and then suck it up with the bagger attachment. And then I've got my leaf mulch. So that's what I will use for mulch at this time of year. I will also use some wilt stop on my boxwoods. You have to follow the directions on when you can apply it. There's a certain temperature range at which you can apply it. This should help because they're a broadleaf evergreen. This should help them from desiccating over the winter. So that can help your boxwoods sort of weather. If you get very dry winds coming through, that can be very helpful for your boxwoods. So that sort of falls under the plant protection category in terms of fall cleanup. Now, of course, I think we've talked about leaves before. For the most part, my approach on leaves is we pick them up off the lawn. We don't like them laying on the lawn. So we suck them up in the lawn, chop them up. We use that for compost and mulch and everything else. Every leaf gets used. I used to actually rake leaves out of the beds to suck them up with the lawnmower, chop them up, and then put them back in the beds. I don't do that anymore. There is one area that really has a lot of leaves in it, and I might have to go in there and move some of those out of there just because they're covering the plants at this point. But for the most part, I decided that it was rather absurd that I was pulling leaves out of a bed to chop them up and put them back in again. So unless I'm worried about leaves creating like a mat and choking out plants, I just leave them where they lie. You wouldn't believe how quickly they break down and go into your soil. So to me, it's one of those things where I'm a little bit hands off and let those leaves just kind of lay where they fall when they're in the beds. And then the other thing that I'm going to show you, and this is higher up on my priority list, is creating an area for a new bed, and how I do that to sort of set myself up to make that process easier in spring. So let's go take a look at what that looks like. The other thing I'm going to do here is cut down my chive hedge. So you guys, I have this chive hedge that goes around my circle garden. I've already cut it back at least once, if not twice this year, twice I think. And I could let it stay here for winter, although it does get really messy looking in spring. But to be honest with you, the reason I'm cutting it now is because this is a great source of green material for the compost. And since the compost right now is full of all leaves, a little bit of greens will help that compost get going. So I'm actually just going to go around and just roughly cut all of this back, and then also cleans up the gravel a little bit so I can blow that off and get that nice and clean before winter too. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is nothing earth-shattering. You've probably seen this before. I certainly didn't invent this. I'm just using cardboard and mulch to suppress the weeds in this area. Now this is over by the new garden, and this is part that I actually planned on planting last year, but I ran out of resources, both energy, money, time. All of it went away last year, so I just sort of stopped. And I don't have that far to go to just sort of fill this area in. Now, whether I plant this next spring or not, I don't know. I might actually wait. I'll just kind of play this one by ear. But what I do here is we've come through here with the lawnmower for most of this and cut everything down. A weed whacker would work great too. And then I've just taken old corrugated cardboard, taken off all of the plastic tape that I can find, laid it down, and we're just laying just some wood chips over the top. Now the stuff that I'm putting on here is actually what's called arborist chips. So this is what is left from when we had some trees taken down. We always have the tree guys, the chips that they make, we always have them leave a pile for us. It's fabulous addition to your garden because it has both greens and browns in it. So it actually does its own composting. So also it's free. So that is important. Everything you see here is free unless you count the cost of the stuff that came in the boxes that I bought. So we're just gonna I'm gonna put a pretty healthy layer of wood chips over the top of this cardboard. One, to just keep that weed suppression down. Two, to keep them weighed down. And three, because this will break down actually really quite quickly and make really nice soil over here. So that's what's happening over here. So this is not lasagna gardening, which you may have heard of, where you layer browns and greens. This is just a simple way of suppressing weeds. So, but this should be broken down enough to plant in this area, and the mulch will already be applied for me once we get to, say, later spring or earlier summer. It probably wouldn't be ready right at the beginning of spring, but I don't plan on doing anything here until then. This is sort of one of the things that was on my priority list for this year because it really sets the stage and will make my job in spring so much easier. So, okay, so I'm gonna keep spreading wood chips over here, keep going with those fall jobs. I hope you're doing the same in your garden. My message to you about your fall jobs is just prioritize the things that absolutely must be done in fall, and then go into those things that are great to do, but you don't necessarily have to do. And don't stress about it too much because, like I said, a lot of this is sort of up to you as to how you want to approach your garden. Very little of what you do is going to be a disaster or cause a big problem. So just do what's right and what works for you. And if you can get lots done, great. And if you can't, you know what? There's always spring, so don't worry about it too much. All right, I hope you're having a great day in your garden, and we'll see you soon.